I should have known something was wrong when Marcus offered to pay 6 months' rent up front, in cash. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment I met the man who would try to steal everything from me, and how I made sure he regretted every single second of it. It started 3 months ago. I had just listed my deceased grandmother's house for rent. She'd left it to me in her will, and honestly, I needed the income. The housing market was brutal, and I was barely keeping my head above water with my own bills. Marcus Chen contacted me within hours of the listing going live. He spoke perfect English with just a hint of an accent that made him sound educated, worldly. When we met for the viewing, he showed up in a Tesla, wearing a tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "This is exactly what I've been looking for," he said, running his hand along the original crown molding in the living room. "I need a quiet place to work from home. Very important meetings, you understand, clients in different time zones." He was charming, knew exactly what to say, complimented the restoration work my grandmother had done, asked thoughtful questions about the neighborhood. "Cash, I can have it for you by tomorrow. 6 months, that was $12,000. $12,000 that would solve every financial problem I had. Pay off my credit cards, fix my car, maybe even take an actual vacation for the first time in 3 years. "That's very generous," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'll need to run a background check first, verify employment, the usual process." Of course," Marcus smiled. "I'll send you everything you need. References, pay stubs, the works. I just really need to move in quickly. My temporary housing ends in 5 days." He sent me everything that night. Employment verification from a tech company I'd actually heard of. Bank statements showing a healthy balance. 3 reference letters from previous landlords singing his praises. A credit report that looked flawless. I even called one of the references, and they confirmed everything. Told me Marcus was a model tenant, quiet, always paid on time, left the property in better condition than he found it. I ignored the tiny voice in my head, the one that sounded like my grandmother, whispering, "If it seems too good to be true." 2 days later, Marcus showed up with the cash. $12,000 in $100 bills, neatly banded and stacked in that expensive briefcase. We signed the lease. He handed me the money. I gave him the keys. He moved in that afternoon with just a few suitcases and some furniture that arrived in an unmarked truck. For the first month, everything seemed perfect. He paid the utilities on time, kept the place clean when I did the inspection, even sent me a thank you text for being such an understanding landlord. I started to feel guilty for ever doubting him. Then in week 5, my bank called. "Miss Rodriguez, we need to speak with you about some unusual deposits." My stomach dropped. "What deposits?" "You deposited $12,000 in cash 6 weeks ago. We need to verify the source of these funds for our anti-money laundering protocols." I explained about the rental property, the tenant, everything. The bank representative was quiet for a moment. "Ma'am, I need you to check those bills. Take them to a bank branch today. Ask them to verify the authenticity." My hands were shaking as I pulled the cash from my safe. I hadn't deposited it yet because I was being paranoid, wanting to hold on to it for a few months to make sure Marcus didn't suddenly disappear or trash the place. I took 5 of the hundreds to my bank branch, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The teller ran them through the counterfeit detection machine. Once, twice, 3 times, she looked up at me with sympathetic eyes. "I'm sorry. These are counterfeit, very good ones, but fake. I need to confiscate these and file a report." The floor fell out from under me. $12,000. All of it fake. I had given a scammer the keys to my grandmother's house, and he'd paid me with worthless paper. I drove to the house immediately, my mind racing through every terrible scenario. Was he running a drug operation out of there? Stripping the copper pipes? Using it for identity theft? But when I arrived, everything looked normal. Lights were on inside. I could even hear music playing. I knocked. Marcus answered with a smile, holding a glass of wine. Miss? What a pleasant surprise. Is everything all right? I wanted to scream, to call the police right there, to drag him out of my grandmother's house by his expensive collar. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he looked, so calm, so confident, like he'd done this 100 times before and never been caught. Everything's fine, I heard myself say, just doing a routine check. You know how it is. Of course, of course. Would you like to come in? I declined, said I had another appointment, got back in my car. As I drove away, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I was going to beat him at his own game. Before I tell you how I destroyed this scammer's entire operation, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. You're going to want to remember this channel for what comes next, because what I did to Marcus was absolutely beautiful. That night, I didn't sleep. I researched. I dug into every piece of information Marcus had given me. The tech company, it existed, but when I called HR directly, they'd never heard of Marcus Chen. The bank statements? Photoshopped and not even that well once I knew what to look for. The previous landlords? The phone numbers were burner phones, probably his accomplices running a reference scam. That Tesla in the driveway? I ran the plates. It was a rental, and the rental company required a real credit card and real ID to rent it, which meant somewhere in the system there was a trail. I have a friend, Jessica, who works in private investigation, owes me a favor from college when I covered for her with a professor. I called in that favor hard. Jess, I need you to find out everything about someone. And I mean everything. It took her 3 days. And when she called me back, I knew I had him. You're Marcus Chen? He's got warrants in 3 states for fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. But here's the interesting part. He's not working alone. He's part of a network. They've been running this exact scam in 6 different cities over the past 2 years. They target single property owners, usually people who inherited houses, pay with counterfeit cash, and then, this is where it gets dark, they use the properties as temporary bases for other scams. Romance scams, investment fraud, cryptocurrency schemes. They run everything out of these rental houses, then disappear before anyone connects the dots. How much have they stolen? Conservatively, about $2 million over 2 years, from at least 40 different victims. I felt sick, but I also felt something else. Rage, pure crystalline rage. This man, this smiling predator, had stolen from 40 people, ruined lives, destroyed trust, and he was doing it from my grandmother's house, the house where she taught me to bake cookies, where she told me stories, where she died peacefully in her sleep, believing the world was fundamentally good. Jess, I need you to do something for me. And it's going to sound crazy. I'm listening. I need you to help me keep him in that house long enough to destroy his entire operation. There was a pause. You want to take down a professional fraud ring? Yes. Another pause. Then, I'm in. Here's what you need to understand about scammers like David or Marcus or whatever he was calling himself. They're good at reading people, at finding vulnerabilities, at exploiting trust, but they're also arrogant. And that arrogance, that's the crack in the armor. Jessica and I spent the next week building a trap. A wealthy widow looking to invest in tech startups, introduced through a mutual friend at the country club, someone with more money than sense who was desperate for connection after her husband's death. I played the widow, Diane Sutherland. Jessica helped me create an entire false identity. Social media profiles going back years. Photos from charity galas. A website for a fake foundation. We made her real enough to pass any background check and juicy enough that a scammer couldn't resist. The mutual friend? That was Jess, posing as a wealth management consultant. Want someone trustworthy, someone with a proven track record. I watched from my car as David's eyes lit up. Hook, line, and sinker. He bit within 2 days. Sent Jess an email about an exciting blockchain opportunity that was absolutely guaranteed to triple her client's investment within 6 months. All the red flags were there. Unregistered securities, pressure to invest quickly, promises of unrealistic returns. Jess set up a meeting. Diane Sutherland would love to hear more. I transformed myself for that meeting. Gray wig, expensive but slightly outdated clothes. A vulnerability in my eyes that wasn't hard to fake because part of me really was vulnerable, really had been hurt by this man. Jessica coached me on body language, on how to seem eager but not desperate, interested but not stupid. We met at an upscale restaurant. David showed up in a different suit, carrying a different briefcase, playing a different character. This version was warmer, more sympathetic. He asked about my late husband, expressed condolences, talked about legacy and security. The thing about blockchain technology, Mrs. Sutherland, is that it's revolutionizing how we think about wealth preservation, he said, leaning forward with rehearsed sincerity. Your husband would want you to be taken care of. This investment? It's not just about money, it's about securing your future. He was good. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't spent the last 2 weeks learning every trick in his playbook, I might have believed him. How much would you recommend I invest? I asked, letting my voice quaver slightly. Well, to really see significant returns, I'd suggest starting with $250,000, but we can structure it however you're comfortable. $250,000. He was going for the big score. I'll need to think about it, I said. Talk to my financial advisor. I saw the flash of annoyance in his eyes, quickly covered with understanding. Of course, but I should mention this opportunity closes in 1 week. After that, the minimum investment jumps to $500,000, the artificial urgency. Classic scammer move. I'll have an answer for you in 3 days, I said. David agreed, gave me his business card with a fake company name and a burner phone number. As we left the restaurant, he thought he was 1 step closer to a $250,000 payday. He had no idea he just walked into the center of a web we'd spent 2 weeks spinning. Those 3 days were crucial. Jessica and I worked with the FBI. Yes, the actual FBI. Turns out, when you hand them evidence of a multi-state fraud ring operating out of a rental property, complete with documentation, recordings, and a plan to catch them in the act of attempting another scam, they get very interested very quickly. Agent Morrison was assigned to the case. A woman in her 40s who'd been tracking David's network for 18 months but could never get enough evidence for an arrest warrant that would stick. The problem with these guys, she explained in her office, is that they're ghosts. They use fake identities, move constantly, and their victims often don't report the crimes out of embarrassment. By the time we get a warrant, they're gone. We need to catch them in the act with evidence that's absolutely irrefutable. What if we could give you that? I asked. Agent Morrison leaned back in her chair. I'm listening. We laid out the plan. Diane Sutherland would agree to invest, but with one condition. She wanted to see David's operation in person. Wanted to meet the team, see the office, understand where her money was going. For someone investing $250,000, that wasn't an unreasonable request. He'll never go for it, Morrison said. Too much risk of exposure. He will, Jessica countered, because Diane is going to offer to invest $500,000 instead, and she's going to tell him she has 3 friends from her charity foundation who might be interested in investing similar amounts. He's not looking at $250,000 anymore. He's looking at $2 million, Morrison smiled. He won't be able to resist. She was right. When I called David with the good news, he was practically salivating through the phone. Mrs. Sutherland, that's wonderful. And for an investor of your caliber, I think we can definitely arrange a tour of our operation. In fact, I'd be honored to show you personally. I'd like to see it this Friday, I said. Would that work? A pause. I could almost hear him calculating, rearranging his schedule, figuring out how to make this work. Friday is perfect. I'll text you the address. The address he texted me was my grandmother's house. He was going to run his fake investment presentation from the property he'd stolen from me with counterfeit money. The audacity was actually impressive. Friday arrived. Agent Morrison had a team in place. Undercover agents posing as nearby neighbors' surveillance vans, backup units standing by. Jessica was with me, playing her role as my wealth management consultant. We were both wired. Every word would be recorded. As we pulled up to my grandmother's house, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger at what he'd done, anticipation for what was about to happen, and something else, a grim satisfaction that I was about to take back what was mine. David greeted us at the door. The house had been transformed. He'd set up a fake office in the living room, complete with multiple monitors showing fake trading screens, a wall of fake certifications and awards, even a receptionist desk manned by a young woman who was probably another member of his crew. "Welcome to Chen Capital Management," David said with a broad smile. "Let me introduce you to my team." He walked us through the house, showing off his elaborate setup. Each room had been staged. The dining room was a client relations center. My grandmother's bedroom was a private consultation suite. Even the kitchen had been converted into a break room with expensive coffee equipment and imported snacks. It was all fake, all of it, but it looked real, convincing. I understood then how he'd fooled so many people. The attention to detail was remarkable. "Now, Mrs. Sutherland, let me show you exactly how your investment will work," David said, gesturing to one of the computer monitors. "We're partnering with a blockchain platform that—" "Actually," I interrupted, "before we go any further, I have a question." David's smile faltered for just a second. "Of course. Is your name really Marcus Chen?" The room went silent. The fake receptionist looked up. Jessica tensed beside me. David's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, concern, calculation. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "Because that's what you told me when you rented this house from me 6 weeks ago with $12,000 in counterfeit money." I reached up and pulled off the gray wig. The fake receptionist tried to run out the back door and was immediately tackled by an agent. David stood frozen, his face pale, as Morrison read him his rights. The other members of his crew, there were 4 total, were all arrested within minutes. But here's the part that made it all worth it. As the agents were processing the scene, they found something David had been stupid enough to keep in the house. A laptop with records of every scam they'd run over the past 2 years. Names, amounts, locations, everything. He'd kept it all, probably as insurance against his partners or as a trophy of his accomplishments. Agent Morrison walked over to me as they were loading David into a police car. "You did good," she said. "Really good. This laptop is going to help us identify dozens of victims and potentially recover some of the stolen funds." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, he goes to prison for a very long time. Federal charges for wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, interstate fraud, conspiracy. He's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. His whole network is going down." I watched as they drove David away. He looked back at the house once, and our eyes met through the car window. I gave him a small smile. I wanted him to know that he'd been beaten. That he'd picked the wrong person, stolen from the wrong house, underestimated the wrong woman. But the story doesn't end there, because here's what happened in the weeks that followed, and this is the part that still makes me smile. The FBI recovered about $800,000 from various bank accounts connected to David's network. Not all of it could be returned. Some had been laundered too thoroughly, but they managed to identify 34 of the 40 victims and started the restitution process. I got my grandmother's house back, obviously. But more than that, I got to help those other victims. Agent Morrison connected me with a support group for fraud victims, and I started volunteering. Helping people understand the warning signs, recover from the financial and emotional trauma, navigate the legal system. One woman, Patricia, had lost $50,000 to David's crew in a romance scam. She'd thought she was helping her boyfriend with a business opportunity. When I told her David was in custody and she'd be getting some of her money back, she cried for an hour. I thought I was so stupid, she said. I thought I'd never recover from this, financially or emotionally. You're not stupid, I told her. These people are professionals. They're predators, but they're also beatable. We beat them. The counterfeit money? The FBI actually let me keep one of the bills as a souvenir after it was processed as evidence. It's framed on my wall now, next to a photo of my grandmother. David's case went to trial 8 months later. I testified. So did Jessica. So did 3 other victims who'd been scammed by his network. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I almost declined. I'd already won, after all. David was going to prison. His network was dismantled. Justice had been served. But then I thought about Patricia, about the 40 victims, about my grandmother's house, and how it had been violated by someone who saw other people as nothing more than opportunities for profit. I stood up and looked directly at David. You came into my life as a con artist, I said. You thought you could read me, manipulate me, take what was mine. You thought I was weak because I was trusting. You thought you were smarter because you were ruthless. But here's what you didn't understand. Kindness isn't weakness. Trust isn't stupidity, and underestimating someone is the fastest way to lose everything. David didn't look at me. Not because I want you to suffer, but because I want you to understand what you took from them. And I hope when you get out, if you get out, you remember that the person who took you down wasn't the FBI, wasn't the justice system. It was one of your victims, someone you thought you'd beaten, someone who decided to fight back. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison, with restitution to be determined. His accomplices got between 7 and 12 years each. As they led him away, David finally looked at me, and in that moment I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not defiance, understanding, maybe even respect. He'd been beaten at his own game by an amateur, and somewhere in his twisted mind, he appreciated the irony. I walked out of that courtroom with Jessica beside me and Agent Morrison behind us. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the courthouse steps. It felt like the end of a chapter, but also the beginning of something new. What are you going to do now? Jessica asked. I thought about it for a moment. Thought about my grandmother's house, about the rental income that was now legitimate, about the money I'd recovered. Thought about Patricia and the support group and the way it felt to help other victims find their footing again. I think, I said slowly, I'm going to start a nonprofit, help fraud victims, teach people how to protect themselves, work with law enforcement to identify and stop scammers before they can hurt anyone else. Using your grandmother's house? Jessica asked with a knowing smile. Using my grandmother's house, I confirmed. That was 6 months ago. The nonprofit is called Second Chances, and we've already helped 12 people recover from fraud, identify 2 other scam operations, and put together educational materials that are being used by local police departments. We operate out of my grandmother's house, the same rooms where David ran his fake investment scheme, now filled with people learning how to protect themselves and rebuild their lives. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I just called the police that first day. David would have disappeared. His network would have moved to another city, found other victims. The FBI would still be chasing ghosts. But because I decided to fight back, to turn the tables on someone who thought he was untouchable, 40 victims got justice. A predator got caught, and a house full of painful memories became a place of healing and empowerment. My grandmother used to say that the best revenge is living well. And she was right. But sometimes, just sometimes, the best revenge is making sure the person who hurt you can never hurt anyone else again. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been scammed or known someone who was, I want you to know something. You're not alone. You're not stupid, and you're not powerless. There are people who will help you, organizations that exist to support you, and ways to fight back that you might not have considered. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about people who refused to be victims, who turned the tables on those who tried to hurt them, and who proved that justice isn't just about the law. It's about standing up and saying, not me, not today, not ever. And if you're out there, David Marchetti, currently residing in federal prison, I want you to know something. Every time someone walks through the doors of second chances, every time we help a victim recover or stop a scammer, I think of you. Because you didn't just try to rob me of my money or my property. You tried to rob me of my faith in people, my trust in humanity, my sense of security, but you failed, because I turned your worst act into something good. I took your crime and transformed it into a movement. I used your arrogance to build something that will help people long after you're released from prison. That's the real revenge. Not seeing you behind bars, though that's satisfying. Not getting my money back, though, that helps. The real revenge is knowing that you created your own worst enemy. You came after the wrong person, at the wrong time, in the wrong way. And in doing so, you didn't just lose your freedom. You inspired something that will work against everything you stand for years to come. So thank you, David. Thank you for trying to rob me, because in the end, you gave me a purpose I didn't know I needed. If you made it this far, drop a comment letting me know what you would have done in my situation. Would you have called the police immediately? Tried to handle it yourself? Or would you have done something completely different? I read every comment, and I love hearing your thoughts. Remember, the scammers want you to feel alone, to feel embarrassed, to stay quiet. The best way to beat them is to speak up, share your stories, and look out for each other. Until next time, stay smart, stay safe, and never underestimate the power of turning the tables. This is my story. I'm proud.